Welcome to this episode of the Aquarist's Edge, a podcast for home aquarists just like you. Learn more about how to keep a thriving aquarium and discover ideas and tips to give your aquarium the edge. And now, over to our host, Arthur Preston.
Whether you are a brand new beginner aquarium keeper, or whether you've been keeping fish and aquatic animals for many years, one of the things that we all have to get involved with is tank maintenance. And it's one of those things that we just have to do. We need to make sure that our tanks are kept clean, to make sure that our inhabitants of our tanks are healthy. And people have various ways of doing this. There are some people who have beautiful, pristine show tanks everywhere you look. And then you have those who have a slightly different approach. And I guess it all depends on what you're wanting out of your tank and what you're wanting out of the hobby. However, what is true is that no matter what approach you take, keeping your fish healthy and the living things in your aquarium well looked after has got to be a top priority. And whether you have a pristine show tank or have a more natural look, whatever aesthetic you're going for, what doesn't change is the fact that there needs to be some form of maintenance on a fairly regular basis. So in this episode of the Aquarist Edge, I'm going to explore some ideas, some thoughts around maintenance in tanks, and hopefully you can take something out of this as well. So currently I have about 30 tanks that I maintain, and some people might think, well, that's a heck of a lot of tanks, and other people are going to think, well, that's not very many at all. Well, whatever it is, whatever your particular viewpoint is, what doesn't change is that I've had to find a way to maintain these 30 tanks. And some of them are designed to be a little more natural, that's intentional. Others, well, while certainly not show tanks, certainly have a cleaner aesthetic. But what doesn't change is that I've had to make sure there's some kind of a system to make sure water gets changed and general maintenance happens on a regular basis. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that there's power in routine maintenance. When something becomes a habit, we take it on board. It becomes something we just do. So for example, in my own routine, I know that a weekend, be it a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, is going to be a tank maintenance morning. Now, I don't do all 30 tanks in one go. I will divide and conquer. Some I'll do on the Saturday, some I'll do on the Sunday. But one of the things I will always do is regular water changes. And this might seem like it would work, but it does in fact keep your tank looking healthy. And more importantly, keep your fish healthy. It prevents issues such as algae blooms and keeps the nitrates at a healthy level. It can also remove the toxins that have accumulated over time, and can also replace the trace elements that plants and fish need to thrive. So again, the tip for this is to simply set aside a specific day each week for water changes. Make it part of your routine like any other household chore. And don't wait for your tank to look too dirty. By that stage, it may already be a bit late. By doing regular maintenance, you can prevent bigger problems from occurring. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I adopt somewhat of a divide and conquer strategy. Some of my tanks are designed to look a little cleaner. There's a lot of care taken to make sure that the glass sides are clean, to make sure that the plants look good. And there are others where that isn't the case. These are more functional tanks. I use them to store stock that I will be moving quickly. But that doesn't mean that the tanks are dirty. It doesn't mean that they're unhealthy. It simply means that they haven't had the same level of care taken in terms of the aesthetic. In some of the more natural tanks, I have things like leaves and twigs and a small amount of algae, and I let that accumulate. And for some people that might look messy, but I believe that's actually benefiting the tank's ecosystem. And the detritus that's accumulating at the bottom provides food for snails and shrimps and bottom feeders who help keep things clean naturally. The aquatic plants, the organic matter, the biofilm that accumulates forms a natural habitat that allows beneficial bacteria to thrive. So my advice to you would be assess the type of tank you have, choose how pristine or natural you want it to look, and adjust your maintenance accordingly. For tanks you want to keep looking sharp and smart, make them part of your weekly cleaning routine. For tanks with a more natural, let's say more wild look, it's okay to let things get a bit messier, as long as your filtration is working properly, your air is coming in well, and your water parameters are on point. So my advice is to assess the type of tank you have and to choose how pristine or natural you want it to be. For tanks you want to keep looking sharp, make these part of your weekly cleaning routine. For tanks that you want to have a more wild look for, it's okay to get a bit messier. these tanks can look a bit dirtier. As long as the filtration system is working properly, there's enough air coming and your water parameters are on point. It's not always about the aesthetic, but one of the things you have to do is to make sure that you have maintenance as part of the routine for all of your tanks. So let's talk about filtration. When I started using sponge filters in all my tanks, I felt like some kind of a weight had been lifted. I didn't need to worry about complicated filtration systems that require constant cleaning or frequent maintenance. And sponge filters are fantastic for biological filtration, and they help maintain water oxygenation without creating strong currents, which is perfect for those fish that are more sensitive to current in the water. Sponge filters are ideal for smaller tanks and tanks with delicate fish species. The gentle water movement they create doesn't stress out fish, and the bacteria living in the sponge help to break down ammonia and nitrites. It has been said that sponge filters provide one of the best filtration solutions for maintaining stable water quality in a low maintenance way. So I usually do a rinse of the filters every 2 to 4 weeks, and that keeps the filters running efficiently. And again, you're going to find different opinions on this. Some people will want to leave their sponge filters in their tanks for months on end. Others will do it every couple of weeks. But again, it's up to you. What is your routine? What is the need of your tank? How do you keep your animals healthy? Set your maintenance schedule according to those parameters. Now, what about keeping algae in check? Now, in most tanks, most people have algae at some point or another is going to become a conversation. And in my early days of fish keeping, I used to, I almost want to say panic every time algae started showing up. But I've got to a point now where I see it as a natural part of the aquarium environment. But that being said, I still need to keep it under control, especially in tanks where I want a clearer view of my fish. Algae growth is influenced by a few key factors: light exposure, nutrient levels, and water movement. Overfeeding and excess nutrients can cause algae to thrive, so it's important to maintain a balance. Additionally, too much light can trigger algae growth, which is why I limit lighting to around 8 to 10 hours a day, sometimes less. I've also found that introducing algae-eating fish, such as plecos and ottos, does wonders for algae control. For stubborn algae, I might want to use an algae scraper to gently clean the glass. If algae persists, you can consider reducing the light exposure or adding more algae eaters. And if you have a planted tank, don't be afraid to let little algae build up. It's part of the natural process. You will find people online, well-respected fish community YouTubers, who will say things such as, "Don't ask an animal to do a job you should be doing." Now, I get that to a point, but I also feel that if you have an option of bringing in plecos or a mono shrimp or some of the fish species that love to eat some types of algae, why not do that? Add them to your community tank. Add them into your aquarium. They bring extra life. They bring new fascination into your tank. And if they can help with the maintenance, why not? Now, what about things like your tank decor? Now, if you want a natural aged look, you've got to be okay with the fact that some of your decor is going to look a bit grotty from time to time. Decor items like driftwood and rocks, they naturally accumulate biofilm, which is great for creating a healthy environment for fish and indeed shrimp. But you don't need to scrub everything down every week. You can let these items build up a little bit of a natural film around them. It not only adds to the aesthetic, but also promotes a healthy tank environment. And to be honest with you, I very, very seldom clean decor items, be that natural wood or whether it be some kind of other ornament. But I found that generally in a natural fish tank where there's somewhat of a cleaner crew in terms of the animals and perhaps the snails that you've placed into your tank, there isn't much of a need to keep those things looking beautifully clean as if they're new. Now, if it was in a high-trafficked area where it was designed and aquascaped to show off the beauty of the underwater world, well then yes, I would definitely be tempted to, on a regular basis, take out the decorations and clean them. But for most of us who just want to keep a healthy home aquarium, I don't believe that is essential. For natural tanks, I will allow some growth, and if you want your rocks or driftwood to look a bit more aged, then don't be afraid to let some biofilm accumulate. It's a sign of a healthy tank. So in a nutshell, I would say the key to maintaining a healthy aquarium and, to be honest, staying sane and not letting it become a chore is having a routine that works for you. Regular water changes are a must, but don't forget that not all tanks need the same level of care. With sponge filters, you get simple, effective filtration, And by embracing a little bit of mess in some tanks, you can create a more natural, low-maintenance environment for your fish. In closing, let me also say this. We must remember that maintenance is part and parcel of the responsibility of being a fish keeper. It is not an added extra. It's not something we do if we have time. It is part and parcel of keeping healthy tanks and keeping healthy fish. If maintaining aquariums becomes something that is a chore, something we don't look forward to doing, something that takes the joy out of the hobby, then perhaps it's time to reconsider whether you want to be in the hobby at all. With 30 tanks, I've had some people say to me, but Arthur, why don't you expand? You've got some extra space. Why don't you add another rack of tanks? Why don't you add more this or more that? And my response is always the same. If I add more, I'm going to lose some of the joy of this hobby that I have. I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I don't want the maintenance of the tanks to become something that I don't look forward to doing. At the moment, I enjoy it. I enjoy getting into the garage fish room on a weekend, getting my hands wet, getting involved, filling up the buckets with water because I don't have an automatic water change system at this point. I enjoy that. It keeps me in touch with the tanks, it keeps me in touch with the nature in my tanks, and I want to be able to keep doing that. And I can manage it with the time constraints I have. As soon as I go more than what I currently have, I worry that the regular maintenance schedule that will have to be followed is going to take away the joy of what I do. And I really don't want that. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, remember this. Regular maintenance is vital. Once it becomes a chore, once it becomes something that you dread, it's worth considering whether you want to still be involved in this incredible hobby, where we are responsible for the well-being of a little piece of nature in a glass box. We have a responsibility to keep our tanks maintained well. Make it regular, make it an event you look forward to doing, and you'll find that routine becomes part and parcel of what it means for you to be an effective fish keeper, an effective aquarist. Folks, again, I'm going to ask you, please share this podcast with those who would find it useful. We're all in this hobby together. The more we share, the better we all get at keeping our tanks healthy. Thanks so much for listening. Keep those tanks clean. Enjoy your fish keeping journey. Happy fish keeping, and I will see you at the next episode. Bye for now.
That's it for this episode of the Aquarist Edge. Please consider subscribing to this podcast so that you don't miss further episodes. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast, as this helps make it visible to others. Until next time, keep learning and discovering, and keep finding your Aquarist Edge in this captivating and fascinating hobby.